apparently she had said to him, I want to give you his whole retreat center. 7 rai, and then there's another empty 7 rai of land next to it that's not being developed. So he turned up like, great, I've got this place, I'm going to develop it as a yoga and holistic kind of place, commercial place. And then she was using me as her translator and trying to squeeze more and more money out of him. When she got the idea that he really wants it, she's like, well, you've got to look after me. And he said, yeah, we'll keep you, we'll give you, and you've got to give me money to live. Yeah, we'll give you that, and you've got to pay me for the land. And she's just started upping her ask. And this poor Israeli guy said, you said you were going to give me the land. So that was the last time I left at that point. I thought, you can't talk to people like that. So I did message the Israeli guy. Obviously, things are a bit tough for Israelis at the moment. And he said that he had bought it. So I don't know how he's managed that as a foreigner and her not technically owning the land. But, so apparently he has it, and he's going to turn it into a commercial yoga, holistic healing kind of place. Which could be nice, actually, and he's willing to spend the money on it, but it won't be a retreat center anymore. Yeah. Shame. It's a bit rainy today. I wasn't expecting anybody to turn up. Has anyone never done meditation before? Okay. So I was going to call the event this evening The Big Beautiful Still, as a little quip about Donald Trump's big beautiful bill, just in case you didn't get the joke. But I tried this like a year ago, and I had making meditation great again. And I got hate mail from these liberal people that were like, you might think you're being funny, but you're not. When fascism takes over the world, you won't be laughing about it. I got like 5 or 6 messages from people that were angry, right? Like genuinely angry that I would make a joke about Donald Trump. So I think it's a good little joke. It's a big, beautiful still. Okay, so we're going to sit together for about 30 minutes or so, and then have some Dhamma reflection, a bit of question and answer if you have questions, and then we will finish before 8 o'clock for sure. If you're all ready, settle yourself into a meditation posture. And whatever meditation system you are accustomed to, feel free to continue with that system. We just started the meditation sessions. If you need to, you can use the breath as an anchor point. Breathing is a neutral object of perception. It's not exciting, it's not dull. There's no desire for it and no aversion for it. When you put your mind onto a neutral object, you can take the mind to a neutral mind state. The mind will generate a state depending on the object of perception. Whatever you perceive with the mind takes on that characteristic. If you perceive noises or feelings in your body, you like it, you dislike it, the mind takes that characteristic. If you're reasonably comfortable, then the mind will start to think in stories. Think about what it wants to eat, where you're going to go tomorrow, what you want to buy, thinking about family, TV shows, food, prices. This is just another object of perception. Using the breath, you make the resolution not to follow the habit of the mind for liking and disliking, for paying attention, for perceiving things that you like or are attracted to, or you dislike, have aversion to. Breath can be made into something beautiful, a calm, reliable place to put attention. If you have some experience with meditation already, I would recommend that you drop all meditation objects. Even the object of meditation is still just another object of perception. Sit with attention inside the body and remain knowing, not forgetting. Mindful, not lost. Present, not absent. The sense of self, the sense of presence can intensify. Bright, clear and aware, not letting the mind wander here and there. Whatever your meditation method, please have patience. It takes a long time to train the mind. So we'll sit together for another 20 minutes or so. So for the last few minutes of the meditation, use the thought, imagination, intention to arouse the thought and feeling of loving kindness, well-wishing for all world beings, unconditional. May use the words, may all beings be happy, peaceful and free from suffering. Or you may use the imagination to call to mind people living, passed away, those you have known or not known, whom you respect and admire, for whom it's easy to arouse the feeling of love. Grandparents, pets, anything you can. Conjure up that feeling. Let it brighten the mind. Feel with sincerity. May all beings be happy, peaceful, and free from suffering. Radiate from the center of your being to all realms, heavenly realms, unseen realms, human, animals, hell realms, all beings, great or small, seen or unseen, living or passed away. Sabbe buddha balapatta pachekanancha yan balang arahantanancha te jena rakang bandami sampatso sabba buddha nubhavena satta soti bhavantu te sabbe buddha balapatta pachekanancha yan balang arahantanancha te jena rakang bandami sampatso Sabba Dhamma nubhavena sattha soti bhavantu te Sabbhe buddha balapatta pachekanancha yang balang arahantanancha te jena rakang bandami sabbatso Sabba sangha nubhavena sattha soti bhavantu te. Okay, good. Relax your posture. Okay, so this evening's topic, distraction. This is one of the common teachings in Buddhism. If we go back to the original suttas, original teachings, usually they're quite simple and quite straightforward, very formulaic. And usually the Buddha would teach trying to think of the word, holographically. So a holograph forget that. Let's go down a route I don't want to go to. So he would normally teach in ways that would go right from where you are all the way to enlightenment in a short, simple teaching. And he did not lay out a grand philosophy or a long book that you then have to learn the book and memorize the teachings. He would give short, sharp, simple teachings to people according to their disposition and according to their question. So it's a mistake to think that you have to learn all of these different teachings. For example, I'm thinking of doing a series of 4 talks about karma. People like karma for some reason. There were 16 different kinds of karma, so I thought we could do 4 talks on each of there are 4 sets of 4. Do you need to know the 16 kinds of karma in order to practice and get enlightened? Absolutely not. And the Buddha never taught in that way. These 16 kinds are something that later scholars have taken from the suttas, taken from the teachings and assembled from the things that he said. Most of the time he simply said about karma, be careful what you do. It has a consequence. Morally has a consequence. So he would usually just give a simple teaching, straightforward teaching, and very often would claim, this is it, this is the entire teaching. Famously, his assistant Ananda said to him one day, it seems to me like loving kindness is half of the path that you teach. And he said, how can you say that? How can you claim such a falsity? Loving kindness is the entirety of the path that I teach. And then another time somebody would say to him, it seems to me that the end of suffering is half of what you teach. How can you say that? The end of suffering is the entirety of what I teach. And he said this for about 40 different things. So the point is, he's not laying out a philosophy of clauses that one has to learn. He's just giving short, sharp, simple teachings, direct, that you're supposed to use. For example, he said one time, I teach only suffering and the end of suffering. In fact, he said, I teach only one thing, suffering and the end of suffering, which leads some people to say that's 2 things. But so I've seen different teachers around the world, and you start to talk about karma or rebirth or meditation. No. He said only 2 things, suffering and the end of suffering, that's it. And then reject all other things. Well, that's just the way that he would speak. He would talk in this way. And the teaching on distraction was like that. So the simple clause that he would teach. Monks, there is distraction, there is equanimity based on diversity and equanimity based on unity. I say you should develop equanimity based on unity. So that would be the phrase, nicely encapsulated in Pali. So diversity, so equanimity or one-pointedness based on diversity. Diversity means all the things in the world that you can like, want, dislike, get away from, buy, click on. All the things of the world. Now, if you have equanimity based on diversity, it means that you stop caring. It's like, well, the mind can think of this, or it can think of that. It can go here, or it can go there. And you just are equanimous. Allow the mind to go where it wants to go. And I've had teachers in my early career who would teach in this way. And I had a feeling that it was wrong. Simply withdrawing from caring or making an effort. Just like, yeah, I can just glide through life and be equanimous. And monks, especially the Western monks, they would try and practice this way. There's a story. I asked him and he said it isn't true, but I think it's true anyway. This was, should I say the name? Ajahn, no. This is Ajahn Amaro. And the story goes that in Wat Pa Nanachat, the monastery in the north, in the early days, things were very scarce. Often they would just have banana and sticky rice. And in the evening they would usually have some kind of drink, tea or coffee, and they could put a bit of sugar in it and you feel like you've had something. So it was kind of like 5 o'clock, 5 p.m. was the... You were there, Bill, right? Was that what they did when you were there? And you're there too, right? And you kind of look forward to it because there's nothing else during the day, and so that becomes the focus, right? You should see what they have now. So the story goes that one day somebody came and offered Coca-Cola, and this is like a really, big thing because you just didn't get that kind of stuff there at the time. But they'd also made coffee, so Ajahn Amaro was in charge of making the evening drink. So he mixed the Coke and the coffee together. Because I'm a renunciate monk, I don't care. Whatever comes, I'll just accept it, glide through life. Well, this is equanimity based on diversity. It means you let the mind go here, you let the mind go there, and it's scattered. This word diversity, I'm going to talk about papancha, it means to be scattered. That kind of equanimity is something specifically the Buddha said you do not develop, because it's a kind of withdrawal and a non-caring and a non-action. The equanimity based on unity, I say you should develop. So the equanimity based on unity, this word unity is the opposite of distraction. So you have these two concepts. And there are various different words used for each of these concepts, but papancha was the Pali word for distraction or diversity, to spread out or to scatter. Nipapancha is non-scattered, non-diversity. It's also a whole bunch of other words used in replacement of that, which mean unity or to unify or to bring together. Specifically, 3 terms: stand together, sit together, and unify or center. So this was the way that the Buddha would describe meditation. You gather consciousness, which means to stand together. You place consciousness, which is the word to sit together, and you unify consciousness. This is important because this is not just allowing things to be as they are, letting your mind be scattered, trying to pretend that you don't care if your coffee and your Coca-Cola are being mixed up. I should say, since he said it, I questioned Ajahn Amaro about this, and he said he never did it. But I'm pretty certain he did. I remember the monks' equanimity in Harnham in Newcastle when I burnt the porridge in the morning. And it's quite hard to cook porridge. We'd have porridge oats every morning. And it's quite hard to cook, actually, on a big stove. And it's only later that I learned that the method is you have to boil the water first and pour the oats onto the water, and then you don't burn it. I was pouring the oats in first and then the water, and that's the wrong way to do it. Anyway, I soon discovered how much equanimity the monks had after I burned the porridge that morning. All these little comments were coming out during the day, like passive-aggressive comments. Not that I care, I'm equanimous, but just for the other people, you burnt their porridge. Nah, that kind of equanimity is not what the Buddha was teaching. He was teaching this Um, an equanimity, which means a non-scatteredness of mind. So scatteredness of mind, papancha, means diversification or to be scattered out. And this is when your thinking takes control of you. Something comes into your mind and you can't stop thinking about it. Now your mind is scattered. It's diffuse and the energy is sent out. So for example, you think of an insult that somebody gave you. You think about the time when you were blamed for something that you don't think that you did. You probably did it, but you'll justify, you say that you didn't do it. This happened to me the other day, actually a couple of weeks ago when I was walking here, and I usually get the train to Chatuchak and I walk from the Chatuchak to here because it's a bit of exercise, and I can't get on the SkyTrain because it's too packed. You can. I can't. I have to maintain like distance from people, and so I usually walk down. And as I was walking down, I crossed the road, and I usually use what I call the monk's privilege, that when the robes are there, everybody's supposed to stop. And that kind of happens in Thailand. I get very disconcerted when I go to foreign countries and people don't stop for me. Like for a while I feel everybody's being really rude, and then I remember, wait, no, I'm just a normal person. So usually people kind of give way a little bit, and so I crossed the road when the light was on red for crossing and the light was on green for the traffic. Now there wasn't that much traffic, but there was one motorbike that was coming down, and I think he can just go behind me or he can just go in front of me, but we were on a kind of collision course, and so I just turn around and just carry on walking in a holy manner, trusting that he's going to avoid me. Anyway, he did avoid me, I'm still here. But as he went past, he beeped his horn and wagged his finger at me. So it's amazing all the justifications that come up into the mind. Like, well, you could have just gone round, or sharing the road, and don't you respect monks, and I was walking quickly, and so many things come into my mind to justify. I was wrong, I was in the wrong. He was right to wag his finger at me. And I thought, you shouldn't wag your finger on a motorbike, you're losing control of the motorbike. It gets into your head, right? You have these kinds of stories, something that happens, especially when you've been blamed for something, or you expect a visa and they don't give it to you, or your expectations are thwarted, and then it gets into your head, and then it compels you to think about the story. This compulsion to think, this compulsion to enter into stories is the enemy of meditation. To the degree that you can catch stories and give it up and sit, that's the degree to which you are a good meditator. The degree to which a story comes into your mind, captures your attention, and compels you to think about it. That's the degree which you're not a good meditator. And it's hard, right? Because these stories come into your mind, and they may be important stories. You do have to pay your mortgage, and you do have to get visas, and you do have to navigate relationships, and you do have to work with difficult people. So the stories, these things are important. It's your life. I get that. But you have to train yourself in that ability to be able to let it go. The issue with a story that comes into your mind is you feel that if I can just think about it, I can resolve it. Somebody said something to me, and in my mind I'll recreate the conversation, and now I'll have a witty reply that will devastate their argument and leave them hanging their head in shame. You know you get a feeling of resolution then for a little bit of fake resolution, right? You feel like, yeah, now I told them. Of course, this thing happened 10 years ago. So that's what the thinking about the story, that's the claim that the story has on your mind. It says, if you just think about me and think me out, then this matter will be resolved. Of course, what happens is you just train yourself in more of that tendency to launch into stories, launch into the thinking. You just increase that tendency. That's why years ago Sigmund Freud was offering this therapy, like scream therapy. He said it's like a steam engine, and you build up pressure inside your system of anger or disillusionment or something, and then if you scream and beat the pillow and cry it out, then you will release the tension. That was Freud's idea, and he was totally wrong. I've seen this on YouTube. After Donald Trump won the election, there was a whole bunch of people that were lined up in a forest and screamed their anger at the forest and beating themselves and Did you see that video? It's a bit crazy. But modern psychology says that doesn't work. If you deliberately call those emotions up, you increase your tendency to have that emotion. So you won't get anger out. It's not a pressure cooker where it builds up pressure and you have to get it out. You only resolve it by letting it go. That means when the story comes into your mind, it doesn't hook you, it doesn't hook your attention anymore. Your ability to train yourself to do this, that will make you a good meditator. To the degree that you are not able to control the mind in this way, that you are compelled into this thinking, that's the degree to which your meditation is going to be very difficult, to say the least. So this was the word papancha, to be scattered or to be diffuse. The Buddha said that the opposite of this is nipapancha, or non-scattered, non-diffuse, which means the mind doesn't launch into any story at all. What happens if you just sit with awareness and with attention, knowing yourself, but don't allow attention to go out to any object of perception, any idea, any thought, any feeling, any sound. What happens if you hold yourself in that situation? Usually you'll fall asleep, and then you'll get too much thinking, or then the body will start to hyperventilate. Your entire system is not built to know this point of stillness and this point of peace. So it fights, it panics. It doesn't know how to relate to itself when it isn't thinking about stuff, working things out. What are you when you're not thinking? If you don't have any verbalized thoughts in your mind, what are you? If you can hold yourself into that space, it breaks attachment from all your stories. All of those stories require verbalization, require this endless thinking. That might not be verbalization in my personal mind. This maelstrom of chaos. I can design things, engineering. I can design aeroplanes and boats, and I have fan and buildings, and I can manipulate the things and the different elements and machines. This tendency is launch into a story and then you're gone. For me, I can be gone for hours on end, just manipulating these thoughts. You do get a satisfaction from the thinking, that's for sure, but it's a weak satisfaction compared to doing something real. So I can think about riding my bike through Japan, or I can actually go and ride my bike through Japan. So people who are reality-based tend to do things that will get them out of their head and into direct experiencing of the real world. So, Nipat Pancha is the opposite of getting caught or lost in the technical term objects of perception. Objects of perception. So what this means is you sit and you meditate, and then a sound comes of somebody coming in through the door, and it catches your attention. We use the language of the attention, or the citta, the heart consciousness, goes out to the object. Now you may say, well, the sound has come in, so I'm going in. It's not whether it's internal or external to the body. It means consciousness is always intended, technical term. Intentionality. Intentionality in philosophy doesn't mean what your intentions are. It means that consciousness always has an object. That means you don't love, you love something or someone. You don't hate, you hate something or someone. So every moment of consciousness always has an intended object. So the sound comes and your mind goes out to that sound. That's now become the basis of the building block of this moment of consciousness. You like it or you dislike the sound, or you think it might be your friend, or you think they should or shouldn't come in late, whatever it is, your mind has gone out and got caught in that story. It may only last a moment. Then you come back and then you think, the air conditioner is blowing on me. Now you've dropped that object, now you have a new object. Shall I turn the air conditioner off? Do I like it? Do I dislike it? Shall I enjoy it? Is it right? Is it wrong? Then you're sitting reasonably peaceful and think, yeah, my back hurts. Now you've dropped that object. You've long forgotten the sound. And now your attention has gone out to the feeling in your body. Attention, consciousness always goes out to an object. When you're not paying attention to any object, consciousness comes back. It reassembles. So like I said, the Buddha used these words to gather together, to stand together, and to unify. The three particular words that he would use. He used many different formulas, but to describe meditation. So, some of you may have done Mahasi Sayadaw practice, for example, noting. So you sit and you note, hearing, bring attention back. You note, thinking, you bring attention back. You note, feeling, bring attention back. Always noting where the mind has gone to. The labeling will stop you from getting involved in that object. This is a technical term when we say object of consciousness. It's the launching point into a story. So what happens then? The trouble with this practice, Mahasi Sayadaw practice, is then you're always looking for things to note. Thinking, feeling, wanting, desiring, planning. But the point of doing this practice is so that the mind does not go out to anything. Then you know yourself directly. Attention, consciousness gathers. You can feel it coming into your body. When you see people doing this, often their meditation, they'll be doing this. As consciousness reassembles itself. When the citta, when consciousness doesn't have an object, it just starts to know itself. The nature of consciousness by itself is beautifully happy. It's bright, it's energetic, and it's self-knowing. This is as consciousness reassembles. At this point you're going into jhana experiences, which means specifically the citta is held still, stationary, and then is the first one, and then Second stage is you get this piti, or rapture, which energization that comes through the body. It becomes very bright. The feeling of power. Third stage, then, it becomes very happy. Consciousness by itself, citta by itself, is beautifully happy. I like to say, it's my own word, but absurdly happy. Because there's no reason for it. Happiness in a worldly sense is because you get something that you like. You watch a TV program that you like. You hear a comedian that you like. You get the food that you like. But that kind of happiness is based upon an object. And obviously that object will dissipate. I had a great object of happiness today. I found this, I've got this bag of red lentils. I just love lentils. So I made some lentils with corn on the cob and onion and pumpkin and then a miso soup. Man, it was so good. That was my lunch today. And half a microwave potato and some bread and feta cheese. Man, I was just like, oh. How long does my happiness last with that food? What if I get the food that I don't like? Very often I go down to the sala and in the temple, and it's basically chicken and pork is all and white rice. And I don't like eating meat, and I've never liked white rice ever since I was about 8 years old, and my brother told me it was boiled maggots. I got an aversion for rice. So do I feel happy and sad? Smiles in the sunshine, tears in the rain. Remember that song? Mull of Kintyre? Nobody remember Mull of Kintyre? No? This was... Okay, I'll put it on Facebook. This was 1982, Paul McCartney, his greatest hit. Mull of Kintyre. I'm not going to sing it. Smiles in the sunshine and tears in the rain. The happiness that's based on objects of perception is like this. If consciousness purifies, the happiness that arises from that consciousness is absurdly happy because it doesn't have an object. The Buddha said, this is a happiness in which I will indulge. So I want to go to an actual direct sutta, one that talks about papancha. And I made a few notes from it. The Buddha starts off, he's talking to a Brahmin called Dandapani. And he says, my doctrine is one that does not conflict with others. Because all doctrines are underscored, underlaid by some kind of perception. My doctrine is for one who is detached from sense pleasures, without doubt, without agitation, without the mind in any kind of conscious engagement with objects. Clear? So Dandapani, according to the sutta, wagged his head, stuck out his tongue, and wandered off with his shoulders slumped, muttering to himself, I don't know what this guy is talking about. This is a common phrase within the suttas, that many people would come and hear the Buddha and have no idea at all what he's talking about. It was quite common. So, he was asked, what do you mean by the statement, my doctrine does not conflict with others? He'd often say that people come and disagree with me, but I don't disagree with them. My doctrine, all doctrines are underscored by perceptions, but this does not afflict one who is detached from sense pleasure without doubt, without agitation, without conscious engagement with objects. And he said, by way of explanation, he said, because papancha sanya sakha afflicts the person in whom it has arisen. So papancha sanya sakha, papancha is this word distraction, diversification or scatteredness of mind. Scattered papancha sanya, scattered perceptions. So this is what afflicts people. This is what causes people to disagree with each other, to fight, to get into views, doubts, conceit, desire for rebirth, ignorance, swords, fighting, arguments, all underscored by this simple thing of perceiving things. Perceiving things. So this is what he gave by way of explanation, and then he wandered off. And some of the monks then were discussing what he'd just said. And they went and asked one of the Buddha's main disciples. He said, "Can you please explain what the Buddha had said?" He said, "Sure. As you sit, as perceptions or objects of perception arise in consciousness, you do not find anything there to approve of, to welcome, or to attach to. This is the end of repulsion, end of views, doubts, conceit, desire for rebirth, ignorance, swords, fights, arguments." The list is a little longer, I've condensed it for you. Slippery bastions was one of the phrases. Do not find anything there to approve of, to welcome to, or attach to. This is what was meant when the Buddha talked about non-attachment. It wasn't just not caring about things. And I had a French guy in my temple once, and he was a bit loco. And he said, we told him that he had to go and do a visa. So we wrote letters for him to take to the Ministry of Buddhism so he could get a visa to come to stay for a year. And he said, the Buddha wasn't attached to visas. I shouldn't, man, you've got to go and get your visa. And he just insisted, no, the Buddha's wasn't attached to visas. He never said anything about visas. I should be able to just be here. And yeah, so we had to throw him out. That's not non-attachment. That's not doing your duty. In Christian terms, paying to Caesar what is owed to Caesar. Paying to the Thai government the visa application that you owe to the Thai government. So this disciple of the Buddha, one of his main disciples, said, by way of explanation, as thoughts and concepts arise, objects of perception arise, do not find anything to approve, to welcome or attach to. Because of the eye and objects of the eye consciousness will arise with something that you see. This is contacting or touching. When you touch something, you feel it. When you feel it, you perceive it. When you perceive it, you think of it. When you think of it, you proliferate and get scattered. Because of the ear and sounds, when hearing consciousness arises, that is touching or contacting. When you touch sounds, feeling will arise, perceiving will arise, thinking will arise, proliferation will arise. When you have the mind and you have thoughts that come into contact, thinking consciousness arises. That is contacting or touching through the mind sense. When you touch something, you feel it. When you feel it, you perceive it. When you perceive it, you think it. When you think it, you proliferate around it. If you withdraw from contacting things, this feeling of touching things or contacting things, then there is no feeling of contacting the thing. There is no feeling of liking and disliking. There is no perceiving it. There is no thinking of it, and there is no proliferating around it. This was the meaning, he said, of the Buddha's words. So that was the sutta. I can put a link to this sutta on Facebook if anybody wants to follow up the original. Suttas are kind of hard to read because they're designed to be recited, not read. And they're very formulaic, so it can be difficult to if you're not accustomed to it, but I can put the original resource up there. So is that clear enough for meditation? Meditation is not about holding a particular object in the mind, which is the way meditation gets sold. It's good if you need to do that. If you need something to ground yourself, for example, you use the breathing, then thinking comes up and you bring your attention back to the breathing. You need somewhere to place the mind, or a mantra, or a visualization. These things can be useful, but use them as a tool. But note that for meditation to progress, you have to withdraw from this process of constantly picking up objects of perception. Then consciousness will gather together, stand together, sit together, and will unify. As it unifies, it starts to go into these intensified states of presence or awareness. This is important because meditation, for most people, can go the opposite direction into dullness or sleepiness or kind of spaciousness, or where everything kind of stops and goes oozy-woozy. And I spent years thinking that was meditation. Clear as mud. Clear as mud, but we covered the ground. The confusion made my head spin round. Anybody like me to clarify anything there, or repeat anything, or explain anything? So, liking and disliking is this word Vedana in Buddhism, and it means putting your attention, any object that you can put your attention onto, together with that object will be either an attraction towards it, an aversion from it, or a neutral feeling towards it. So anything that you look at will have one of these three. There's no other possibility. Almost everything that you can perceive is going to be neutral. However, you spend 99% of your life with the things that you like and you dislike. That's what will occupy. That's what will catch your attention and pull you in and create stories. So observing this process of liking and disliking is really important. I use the word for myself, pushing and pulling. So pushing and pulling in the mind. As a lifestyle practice, if you can observe this pushing and pulling and make a determination, I'm not going to be chased around by my mind anymore. This will give you a sense of solidity and a place of refuge. So it's a really good practice. This practice, however, is a practice of Vedana or Vedananupassana. In terms of meditation, of what I was talking about, Nipat Pancha, you have to go beyond liking and disliking. Liking and disliking specifically apply to an object of attention. If you withdraw your mind from going out to objects of attention, consciousness gathers together by itself. Now here's a little trick that wasn't told to me when I was young and practicing. As consciousness gathers together, it becomes blissful. That bliss is to be developed because it doesn't have an object. It's not liking and disliking something. It's the actual natural state of consciousness. And I've come across many meditators who come to this point, often by chance or by karma, and the meditation teacher tells them, that's piti, rapture, you reject it and come back, breathing in, breathing out. But their mind's attaining in the right way. But the meditation teachers want to keep knocking you back to where they're at with this kind of more philosophical or lifestyle practice. So it's really important to know when the mind starts to attain in the right way, to recognize it, say, okay, that's the right direction I should go. And this is very specifically without Vedana. There's no liking and disliking. There's a famous saying in the sutras of Sariputta, the Buddha's foremost disciple, and he was wandering along one day saying, this nibbana is bliss, this nibbana is bliss. And somebody said to him, but if you're talking about bliss, that's just liking. That can't be nibbana. And Sariputta says, no, it's blissful because there is no liking and disliking. So this is important to know when you go past the practice of watching liking and disliking. As a lifestyle practice, I mean, I do talks on Vedana too. It's really good to note this pushing and pulling in your mind and note just how much of the time you get so attached when you really don't need to, or you dislike something when you really had no reason to dislike it, or how easily liking and disliking can flip and change. I was in the monastery in Britain and I went with my abbot from Newcastle on retreat in London, and every morning they would bring us in toast for breakfast. Now I'm a simple person. My favourite food in the whole world is toast. I like toast. It's just the best. Other things, beans on toast are fine, or cheese on toast is fine, but they were putting this disgusting beef spread on the toast, and no, and I vegetarian, or at that time I was vegetarian, and it just like my heart would just sink. And then after a few days I said, can you just bring the toast without the spread on it? Not that I care. And they said, well, don't you like it? And I said, well, we're vegetarians here. And they said, it's vegetarian, this is Marmite. Now I thought Marmite was beef spread. I was like, oh, it's not beef. And then now I never go a day without eating Marmite. Marmite is just the best thing that's ever been invented. I mean, it beats the wheel, in my opinion. How quickly my liking and disliking can just flip from really disliking it to really liking it. So yeah, watching the liking and disliking in your mind, it's so deceptive. It's a conjuring trick that's played on your mind. And actually, you don't need to like and dislike things. You talk to people and then you immediately like or dislike them. Like, why? Why would you do that to yourself, let alone the other person? There was, do you know Monty Python? You know Monty Python, okay. I think anyone under my age doesn't know Monty Python. They were a comedy group from Britain in the 1970s and early 80s. And they had a sketch. They do these ridiculous sketches where they slap each other in the face with a fish and stupid things like this. The Ministry of Silly Walks. And I realise that sounds a bit odd to anybody that hasn't seen it. And they made a comic scene, and they would, I don't know what the sketch was, but in the sketch they were sitting around a table. It might be the souffle scene in Meaning of Life. And they wanted to make it as ridiculous as possible. And they had a chandelier, and then they thought, well, chandeliers are normal. We're going to make a ridiculous chandelier. And so John Cleese said, instead of a chandelier, we should have a goat's head with the lights on it. And then the other guy, Eric Idle, said, no, it should be a sheep's head. And they got into this huge battle about whether it should be a sheep's head or a goat's head in this scene, and got so caught up in it, they ended up kind of breaking up for the day in anger at each other. So John Cleese tells this story, and then he realized the next day, wait a minute, it's just stupid. That's this process of liking and disliking. It will draw you in, and then that thing becomes so important. If you watch just this pushing and pulling in the mind, things become less important. As they become less important, you have more freedom. You can use that time to develop your loving kindness, or your compassion, or your equanimity. But as regards papancha, scatteredness of mind and the non-scatteredness of mind, as the mind becomes non-scattered, you have to go beyond liking and disliking. Yeah.
Thank you. By the way, this is my first time here.
Okay.
Yes. So a question. At some point today, you said a way to facilitate the letting go of a thought is to label it. Did I understand you? What do you mean by that? What would be a labeling process, and how would you attach a name or a label to a thought? Are they categories they just make up, or there is some protocols that you follow?
So labeling is a specific school of meditation called Mahasi Sayadaw. Comes from Myanmar. It's widely practiced around the world. It calls itself Vipassana, but there are several different schools that call themselves Vipassana. So, specifically, Mahasi Sayadaw, this monk in Burma, he taught this as a way to get people into meditation. And he said you should label things. So as you're sitting here and you hear somebody come in, you note hearing, hearing, in order to stop your mind getting drawn into it. As a thought comes up into your mind, you label thinking, thinking. Now, the labeling, it depends on the teacher. The people have different ideas. The labeling can be specific or it can be general. So it can be thinking, thinking, worrying, worrying, hating, hating, annoyance, annoyance. You can get very specific if a particular story is trying to get your attention. Generally, I would recommend, if you're doing this, is you make the label simpler and simpler and simpler. So if I would do that, which I don't use this practice anymore, but I would just say thinking, thinking, and that's enough. But sometimes there's a story that really drags you in. And then you might need to have a specific label for that story. So that's up to you to do that with wisdom. But remember, the goal is not to go labeling things, but to know the consciousness when it's not going out to anything. That's why as the mind goes to an object, you catch it, bring it back, catch it, bring it back. But the problem with that method is people will spend their entire time trying to find things to label. And often the mind is attaining in the right way, becomes bright, becomes powerful, has the piti, the rapture comes through it, and the teacher's like, no, 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 you should be labeling. Like the mind becomes bright, they say, label bright, bright, and come back to your breathing. You've already done the right thing and you're attaining in the right way. And then they try to keep knocking you back to the method and missing what the method is supposed to take you to. So be careful with the labeling practice. Yeah.
I have a technique question, more about Anapana versus Vipassana, when to do each. I hope we're getting a hard time going through the Vipassana method versus focusing just on the breath. And then if I try to go inside the body, I can anchor into one point, but moving through the body and trying to find similar sensations is very difficult. So I'm wondering, am I doing the technique wrong? Am I approaching it wrong? Is that just a natural consequence of the technique that it is supposed to be difficult?
So you're referring to Vipassana as the body sweeping of Goenka, right? Because Vipassana is every school of meditation claims to be Vipassana. So, you know, Goenka really try and own the term, but every school of Vipassana claims to be Vipassana. Vipassana means insight, means to see clearly, which means to separate what is real and what is unreal. So the body sweeping, this is where you pass the body, pass attention, feeling the sensations through the body, is a particular school of meditation run by Goenka. He was an Indian Burmese guy. I did one 10-day retreat of that style. I always recommend that retreat is a good retreat. However, I wouldn't pursue that meditation all the way. Because, again, it gets caught up in the method. There is a point where you have to drop the method, whatever method you're using. All schools of meditation are teaching you to put attention onto an object. Sweeping sensations in the body, labeling, a mantra, visualization. They're always telling you to hold an object in the mind. But as I was talking in this sutta, the Buddha is saying you shouldn't hold any objects in the mind. That process of perceiving objects is the problem in the first place. When the mind stops going out and perceiving anything, then it will start to gather by itself. So my recommendation is use the meditation method, but know when you've gone past it, know when it's served its purpose. Otherwise, people are hacking out meditation method for years and years and years without any idea where it's going. I was one of those people. My main method was patience. Let everything be as it is. I was told, whatever comes into the mind, just allow it to be there. So I would sit and there'd be a bit of thinking come up, and there'd be a bit of pain come up, and then there'd be a bit of noise come up, and then I would try to just be patient with all things, and I would get into a state of dull equanimity. It was the wrong way. I'd been given the wrong advice. That being patient is good when you're impatient, when you need to correct course, but it's not real meditation. Meditation, the real meditation is that you have an intensified sense of self, intensified presence. The mind becomes very bright, it gathers together, it energizes through the body. And you know it directly then, like, oh, that's the right thing. This is all happening because my mind isn't going out perceiving different things. Yeah, just shortly, because we're out of time. I'll still be here, by the way, if anybody wants to talk longer, but we will stop in a few minutes. Let people go who want to go home.
So I heard you mention jhana earlier, and I've heard 100 descriptors of different jhana methods or structures. And I'm wondering if you recommend finding one system or jhanic kind of progression, or can you just generalize it to, I've heard it said, like, just notice the disturbance in your mind and just keep lessening it. Is that sufficient? Because sometimes I oh, this system and this, or this, is jhana like this, it's kind of...
Again, systems will get in the way. When the mind attains in the right way, the system of meditation you're using will get in the way of that attainment. You have to know when to drop that system. As for jhana, we don't have much time, but I'll do, I mean, it's an hour's talk, but I'll do my best in 30 seconds. The way jhana is normally described is concentrating on a meditation object, like the breath or a color or fire or light. This actually came much later, this idea of entering into concentration on objects. It can be done and you will enter into trance-like states. Very specifically, when the Buddha was talking about jhana, he's talking about not having an object. Forcing your mind onto an object of meditation is not the meditation he was talking about. It's very specifically when the mind does not have an object. And then it will gather by itself. Then there will be four. First jhana is applied and sustained attention. Vitakka vichara, which means you're holding the mind back. The mind wants to go to things. It wants to think, wants to perceive, it wants to feel, it wants to create stories. You have to hold the mind in restraint. Not on another object, not on thoughts, not on colours or breath. Just hold in restraint. Applied and sustained attention, you've caught hold of the mind. As the mind keeps going out, all you need to know is the disturbance and non-disturbance. Well, that thing that you said was correct. That then is all that you need to know. You know when the mind is going out into something and when the mind is settling back into something. That's the only meditation method that you need at that point. Then the piti will arise. This energization comes through the body and you feel it, and your body will feel like it's breaking. Your head, you often see people, their heads going like this, like I know exactly what they're doing. This energization comes through. The piti is they call rapture, but it's a physical energization. Then the sukha, that's the second jhana. The third jhana is sukha, happiness. An absurd happiness arises that actually blocks your meditation because you just don't want to do anything. You're just like, there's nothing to do anymore because you're just happy. It's very bizarre, especially for an Englishman, because we like misery. We don't like happiness. We like to be miserable. We like to complain about things. And then the fourth one, equanimity, where the mind will just become pristine. But it's equanimity based on unity. The mind is 100% unified, pristine and pinpoint. I like to think of it as a chime. It just chimes. So yeah, that's going into... And so there is no specific method for doing this. Methods of meditation are objects that you hold in perception. When the mind attains in the right way, it's withdrawn from holding objects of perception, very specifically. Yeah. Okay. We're done for today. I will be back in 2 weeks' time.
Well, thank you very much, Pandit. Sadhu, 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 is what we say. And indeed, in 2 weeks' time, Pandit will be back again. Next week, we have another session here. We have what we call the Dhamma circle. I know some of you have been attending. We sit literally in the circle and we read a text about Buddhism. And we discuss that text on the basis of nobody has the right answer. We can all think about it. We can ask questions and we share our experiences. For tonight, when you leave the building, you will know there are 2 donation boxes. One is meant for Pandit and the other one is for the foundation, and they graciously let us use this room for free. But the aircon is running, the lights are on. If you want to show some gratitude, which is also recommended by the Buddha, you can put some paperwork in those 2 boxes. It's printed paper.
That's a new one. This is good. No, I like that. It's good.
Then, if you could help us with cleaning out the room, the brown seats have to go to the balcony, but be very careful when we go around to the Buddha, and the white seats have to go behind the curtain in the main hall. And then, last but not least, maybe I shouldn't do this, but you were trying to make a little joke about a certain gentleman in Washington, and you didn't want to do it, but then you were talking about diversity. And apparently that gentleman in Washington agrees with the Buddha, diversity is not the right basis. Sorry for that. Thanks.
Okay, good. If I can just briefly give the blessing. Sabitiyo vivachantu sabharogo avinasatu mate bhavat vantarayo sukhiti kayuko abhava abhivadana silisani changvuta pachayino chataro Dhamma vadanti ayuvano sukhang bhalang. So yeah, if you can help to stack the chairs up. And I'll still be here if anybody wants to chat a bit further. Things